My son Eli found it one day while walking a trail in between two schools. It was a small patch of green surrounded by tall pines and myrtles all around. I didn't remember seeing it any time previously during our walks, but the place looked rather old. There wasn't much to it, just some swings, a jungle gym and a single slide. But Eli wanted to go and play immediately. Something about the place felt immediately wrong to me. It was too quiet, too still. There was a slow fog drifting along the grass. "Eli, be careful," I called out. Of course, being only 3.5, he didn't listen. So I sat on the bench nearby and watched him play. I took out my phone to check Facebook and Twitter, telling him we could stay for maybe 15 minutes at the most. I needed to shoot a few messages to my mechanic and insurance company, so admittedly I was absorbed in business. As my eyes occasionally glanced up to make sure he wasn't getting hurt, I saw someone else standing there just on the outskirts of the playground. He was a tall man wearing a perfectly ironed white shirt and pressed dark pants. He was just standing there, staring, watching us. "Eli, we need to get home," I called out. The man was making me uncomfortable. My son whined but listened to me as we continued down the trail. The man didn't stop watching us until we were out of sight. "Mum, I didn't want to go," Eli said, as we made it back to the SUV. He climbed in through my side to get the back seat. "We can come back another day, buddy," I told him. Truth be told, I didn't want to go back to that playground at all. Everything about it was giving me a very bad vibe, but I don't like lying to Eli, and I figured that as long as the weird guy wasn't there, it would be harmless. So the next weekend I walked him back there and let him enjoy it. He was smiling from ear to ear. I noticed also there were other children running about, so that put me at ease. But then as I watched, I also noticed that none of their parents were there. These are 5-year-old or younger. How could any parent worth a grain of salt just let them wander out here? This trail isn't exactly well known. In fact, before we found the playground, I would say I almost never saw anyone. So where were these kids coming from? Their laughter was more intoxicating than the fog. I tried to approach one of the children to ask them their name, but they were too shy. In fact, they all seemed adverse to even talking to me altogether. That gut-wrenching unease from before returned with a vengeance. Something was very wrong here. My instincts screamed at me to get Eli and leave, and this time, I wasn't about to ignore them. "Eli, we need to go," I called out, trying to keep the panic from my voice. But he was already shaking his head, his face scrunched in frustration. "I don't want to leave," he shouted, his voice thick with defiance. I hadn't seen him this upset since the day I'd kept him inside while he was sick, breaking a promise to let him play outside. That day still haunted me, and now this one would too. "Buddy, we can't stay here forever. Come on," I insisted, my voice growing firmer as I tried to coax him down from the slide where he had perched himself like a king on his throne. But Eli wasn't having it. He crossed his arms and stared at me with a look that made my heart ache. I didn't want to be harsh, but the icy fear creeping through me wouldn't allow for softness. I rushed over, pulling him down from the slide, his small body stiff with resistance. "Don't run away from me like that," I snapped, my voice harsher than I intended, but it wasn't just frustration, it was fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. Eli stared up at me, his eyes wide and confused. He didn't understand, couldn't understand why he had to listen, why this place was dangerous. But I knew. I didn't have the answers, but I knew in my bones that something terrible lingered in that playground, something that had no business in the world of the living. And as we hurried away, leaving behind the eerie laughter of the children and the dense fog that clung to the trees, I vowed never to return. But deep down I feared that whatever it was, it wouldn't let us go so easily. It broke his heart when we left. I could feel the weight of his disappointment, but something far more unsettling clung to me as we walked away. The other kids, they just stopped and stared, their wide eyes following us in eerie unison, as if they were mourning his departure too. A few days later, Eli came to me, his voice small and tinged with sadness. "I miss my friends," he said, his words tugging at my heartstrings. "Which ones, sweetie?" I asked, half expecting him to mention some kids from daycare or the neighbourhood. "At the hidden playground," he replied, his tone matter-of-fact. The name sent a shiver down my spine. The hidden playground, a name so disconcerting yet fitting. It was as if the place had been waiting for us to find it, only to slip back into the shadows when we were gone. And it was true. I couldn't find it again, not without Eli. No matter how many times I retraced our steps, the playground remained elusive, as if it had never been there at all. "I don't think we should go back there again, bud. It doesn't seem safe. That equipment is pretty old," I told him, trying to sound reasonable while suppressing the unease gnawing at my thoughts. But Eli wouldn't have it. He frowned, his face crumpling with frustration. "It's special," he whined, his voice trembling with a mix of longing and anger. I tried to reach a compromise, offering to take him to one of the other parks in town, parks with safe equipment and other children to play with. But nothing could sway him. He was fixated on that place, on them. His growing temper worried me, but my instincts were screaming louder than his pleas. I had to put my foot down, even if it broke both our hearts. "I just want you to be safe," I said softly, cradling him as he cried in my arms, his small body shaking with sorrow. For days, Eli refused to talk to me, his silence a weapon wielded by a child who thought he could change my mind. But I stayed firm, resisting the urge to give in. I knew deep down that the hidden playground was not just a place. It was something else, something dangerous. And as much as I hated seeing Eli unhappy, I couldn't risk going back there. I wouldn't. I avoided the trail entirely after that, refusing to even glance in its direction. But even in the safety of our home, I could feel it. The pull of that hidden place, the whispers of unseen eyes watching, waiting for us to return. Eli grew sadder with each passing day, his once bright spirit dimming into a shadow of what it had been. He barely ate, hardly slept, his every thought consumed by the hidden playground. His small frame grew frail, and he spent most of his time locked away in his room, only emerging to ask the same question in a desperate whisper. Can we go back? I was worried. Terrified, really. Was something wrong with him? What had that place done to my sweet boy? The light in his eyes was gone, replaced by a hollow look that sent chills through me. It became too much to bear. Finally, against my better judgment, I caved. "Okay, Eli, we can go back one last time," I told him, my voice heavy with reluctance. You should have seen his face light up. It was like watching a child on Christmas morning, the way his eyes sparkled with joy. But underneath that joy, something darker lurked, something I couldn't quite grasp. As we approached the playground, the familiar unease washed over me in waves. The swings creaked in the still air, and the fog clung to the ground like a living thing. But Eli didn't seem to notice. He ran ahead, laughing, his tiny footsteps echoing in the silence. My heart pounded in my chest when I saw him again. The tall stranger, standing there like he always did, watching the children play with that same unnerving intensity. Why was he always here? What did he want? "Eli, stay close where I can see you," I called out, trying to keep the fear from my voice. But Eli was too caught up in his excitement to listen. The man began to approach us, his footsteps slow and deliberate. There was something off about the way he moved, like he was gliding rather than walking. When he reached Eli, he bent down and smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and offered to push him on the swing. "Don't touch my boy," I snapped, stepping between them, my voice trembling with both anger and fear. Eli turned to me, frustration etched on his little face. "Mum, I'm going to be okay," he insisted, his tone exasperated. For a 3-year-old, he often acted far beyond his years, but this was different. The stranger's smile never wavered. "He is safe with me," he said softly, his voice smooth and soothing like a lullaby. But there was something underneath it, something cold, something that sent a shiver down my spine. Every instinct in me screamed to grab Eli and run, but I was frozen, caught between the need to protect my son and the strange allure of the man's words. The air around us seemed to thicken, and the other children stopped playing, their eyes fixed on us in eerie silence. "I'll call the cops," I said, my voice laced with anger and desperation. But the man didn't even flinch. He simply ignored me, his focus entirely on Eli. With a gentle, almost paternal care, he helped my son into the swing and began to push. The smile on Eli's face was so big, so pure, that I found myself torn between the overwhelming fear clawing at me and the sight of his joy. "Look how happy he is here," the stranger said, stepping back from Eli and gesturing towards the playground. Suddenly there were other children all around us, children who hadn't been there a moment before. They laughed and played, their voices blending into a haunting melody that echoed through the still air. "They all are," he added, his tone smooth and unsettling. The way he said it sent a chill rippling through my body, a cold dread that wrapped around my heart and squeezed. What is this place? I managed to ask, my voice trembling. The stranger turned his gaze towards me, his eyes filled with a strange mix of warmth and something darker, something that made my skin crawl. I keep them safe, he said softly, his voice almost tender as he watched Eli laugh and play, until they are ready to move on. Move on, I repeated, the words ringing in my ears. They made sense, but at the same time they felt distant, like an echo from a place I couldn't quite reach. The man nodded, still watching the children. When they're ready, they stay here, he continued, his voice calm, almost soothing. My blood ran cold. My mouth went dry as I watched Eli leap off the swing and chase after the other children, his laughter mingling with theirs, becoming one with the eerie chorus that surrounded us. Stay? He can't stay, I said, my voice breaking, a desperate edge creeping in. My hands trembled, my body feeling paralyzed by the overwhelming terror gripping me. I called out to Eli, my voice sharp and frantic. Eli, we need to leave now. But he didn't listen. He couldn't hear me, or maybe he just didn't want to. He was too lost in the joy of the moment, too absorbed in the strange, intoxicating pull of this place. The stranger turned to me, his smile never faltering, but there was something in his eyes now, something final, something that told me I had already lost. He is happy here, he said softly, as if that was all that mattered. Panic surged through me, and I rushed forward, trying to grab Eli to pull him away from the playground, away from this man, away from whatever dark force was holding him here. But the ground seemed to shift beneath my feet, the air growing thicker, pressing down on me, slowing my movements. Eli, I screamed, my voice raw with fear, but he just laughed, running farther into the fog with the other children, their figures blurring into the mist. The stranger's words echoed in my mind over and over. He is happy here. And in that moment I realized the horrifying truth. This place, this hidden playground, wasn't just a playground. It was a place where children stayed, and once they did, they never left. It's okay to let go, the man insisted gently, his voice soft as a whisper. He reached out and touched my hand, his smile serene, almost comforting. But beneath that calm exterior I could sense the weight of what he was asking. Eli ran up to me, his small hands tugging at my pants, his eyes alight with excitement. Mommy! Mommy! There's a treehouse and a merry-go-round! Can I go, Mommy? Can I? His voice was filled with pure, unfiltered joy I hadn't seen in what felt like forever. I knelt down beside him, my hands trembling as I ruffled his soft hair. And then, beneath the tousled locks, I saw it. The faint scar running across his head, the mark left behind from when the car had struck him. The truth crashed into me like a tidal wave, and tears welled up in my eyes. It was time to let go. Sure, bud. Go have fun, I whispered, my voice breaking as I forced a smile. Eli threw his arms around me, hugging me as tightly as his little body could manage, and for a moment I held on to him as if I'd never let go. Then, with one last beaming smile, he ran toward the tree line, his laughter echoing through the still air. I knew how much I'm going. I will miss my child. The man followed behind him, pausing to look back at me. He nodded, a silent gesture of understanding, of gratitude, and then, just like that, they were gone, vanishing into the trees swallowed by the fog. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my heart heavy with a mix of sorrow and peace. The playground, the swings, the slides, the laughter began to fade, dissolving into the mist until all that remained was the green grass, untouched and unremarkable. Now I visit that spot from time to time, laying flowers where the playground once stood. Sometimes I see another parent there, someone who knows the same pain, the same loss. We share a quiet bond, a connection forged in the depths of our grief. And sometimes, if I listen closely, I can still hear the children laughing, their voices carried on the wind. And I know, in my heart, that they are where they are meant to be, happy, safe, and free.